Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salawat wa salam ala rasulullah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa min wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, scholars, students, psychologists, mental health professionals, students of knowledge, alim, alimas, brothers and sisters, those who are interested in Islamic psychology, all of our members and colleagues within the ISIP, the International Students of Islamic Psychology Movement and Organization. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very honored and pleased to be with you all. We hope you all are well, and we hope your families are well. And thank you so much for giving out of your precious time to learn more about the sacred tradition of Islamic psychology. This is our, I think, 9th or 10th lecture for this year as part of our international lecture series that we offer twice a month. And today we are honored to present briefly and hopefully even more thoroughly throughout the months, more information about our latest project that we're developing within ISIP and our research center, the Al-Balkhi Institute of Islamic Psychological Studies and Research, in partnership with the Maqasid Institute, which is one of the great institutes within Islamic thought in our contemporary era. We're very honored to work with the Maqasid Institute and to together with them establish the IPRN, the Islamic Psychology Research Network. The research network has been launched already, but it will be thoroughly launched later on this year. And we will speak a little bit more about the objectives of the IPRN and how we are going to use the sacred knowledge and expertise within the Maqasid Institute under the excellent leadership of Professor Jasser Auda. We're very honored to host him for the first lecture and doing a soft launch of the IPRN today and how we can utilize the Maqasid methodology to do more research within the framework of Islamic psychology. So this is a joint initiative, and we're very honored to invite you all to join the IPRN, and how to join will be informed throughout the session in the Zoom chat, inshallah. So today's lecture will be with Professor Dr. Jasser Auda, and the lecture will be about what does it mean to look at psychology through a Maqasidi lens. And as I mentioned, this is a partnership, the IPRN, the Islamic Psychology Research Network, between the ISIP, International Students of Islamic Psychology, the Al-Balkhi Institute of Islamic Psychological Studies and Research, and the esteemed and excellent Maqasid Institute. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. So today's agenda, dear brothers and sisters, we'll just start by reciting Surah Al-Fatiha, as we always do in our lecture series. We're welcoming all of you to be part of this beautiful sohbah and companionship that we have throughout the world. And then we will just go through some of the guidelines for the lecture and for the 5 series lectures that we're doing during the summer to do a soft launch of the IPRN. You can send your questions directly to Sister Fatima Ahmed. You find Sister Fatima Ahmed as one in the chat. So all of your questions to Professor Jasser Auda, please write them directly to Sister Fatima Ahmed in the Zoom chat, inshallah. And she is, I think, co-host for the Zoom, so you can find her there. And we will address these questions in the end during the Q&A portion of our lecture today to Professor Jasser Auda, inshallah. We will introduce it briefly about IPRN and our objectives with the IPRN. And then, of course, we would like to give a certificate of appreciation to our esteemed teacher, Professor Dr. Jasser Auda. Professor Dr. Jasser Auda will have his lecture. It will be about 45 to 50 minutes. And after that, we will have some Q&As. And then we will do some brief closing du'as, inshallah. So let's just recite Surah Al-Fatiha together. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All right, dear brothers and sisters, most welcome. We're very honored to be with you all. So thank you so for joining us. So just a little bit about the Zoom etiquettes, dear colleagues, dear brothers and sisters, excellent colleagues. Feel free to, at all times, have your cameras on and put your gallery view on, because it's always nice to see all of your brothers and sisters from all over the world. We're an international movement, so we have chapters all over the world. We have members all over the world. So it's always nice to see each other and connect with one another. No recording or screenshots are allowed, dear brothers and sisters. We will share the recording on our YouTube channel within a couple of days. so you will have access to that. And we will also email out the PowerPoint presentation of Professor Dr. Jasser to all of you who registered to the venue today. And by the way, if you haven't registered to the venue and you just joined by using the Zoom link, it's important if you want to have a certificate for being part of this IPRN soft launch that you're registered to the venue as well. And Sister Fatima will share all the links throughout the session in the Zoom chat, inshallah, on how you can register to the venue. Keep muted at all times, dear brothers and sisters. This is for the benefit of the lecture and its procedure. If you like, please rename yourself, add your name and your country. It's always nice to see the diversity that our movement is representing ethnically and nationality-wise as well. As I mentioned, ask all of your questions directed to Sister Fatima, and this will be addressed in the Q&A. And if you need any live transcriptions, please press the More button in the Zoom application and request it, and we will be more than honored and happy to give you access to that as well, inshallah. A little bit briefly about ISIP before I allow Sister Fatima to join, just to tell you guys how you guys can be part of getting this certificate to participate in this 5 series program. She will give you guys a little bit more information about the procedure, inshallah. We try to be an inclusive space designed to connect people with diverse background interested in Islamic psychology and Muslim mental health. Our aim is, as ISIP, to disseminate knowledge, share resources, and discuss best practices in a free and accessible manner. And we try to be a platform to enable further development of people's personal and professional interest, studies, and understanding of Islamic psychology within their communities and countries of origin. And the way you can connect with us in ISIP is to join our Islamic Psychology WhatsApp group for discussion and research sharing. These links will be shared in the WhatsApp, in the Zoom chat throughout the session. You can also become a member of ISIP via our website at www.isip.foundation, which is, of course, free, the membership. And then you can get access to our digital library with over 1,000 resources related to Islamic psychology. Also, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have over, I think now, almost 300 lectures with many of the leading scholars within the field and practitioners as well. And these are conducted in different languages as well. And follow us on Instagram or join our newsletter and other ways. And all these resources and links will be shared in the Zoom chat. Also, our research center, the Al-Balkhi Institute, if you want to join and conduct research or be part of the IPRN, the Islamic Psychology Research Network, the links on how you guys can join will be shared in the Zoom chat. And if you're interested to establish an ISIP local chapter in your country, feel free to reach out to us as well. We already have over 30 local and regional chapters all over the world. So Sister Fatima, if you can just briefly unmute yourself and present a little bit about the IPRN and how people can get their certificate, it will be a blessing to listen to, inshallah. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan, dear Sayyid Jamaluddin, our esteemed professor, Professor Auda, and barakallahu fikum to everyone for being here. Alhamdulillah, it's really exciting to be here with you at this initial lecture. As Jamaluddin mentioned, we have our international lectures, and this is the first lecture of a 5-part series that we are launching through the Islamic IPRN, which is the Islamic Psychology Research Network. And up on the screen right now, you will see, if you want to scan that and be a part of this WhatsApp group. This is an initiative between our 3 organizations, ISIP, Al-Balkhi Institute for Islamic Psychological Studies and Research, and the Maqasid Institute. And the aims of this network is to be able to have people who are conducting research, but to do such research with a Maqasid methodology lens, which inshallah throughout today's lecture and the lectures coming up, will deepen our understanding of what the Maqasid methodology is and how that can be applicable to Islamic psychology. So we're really excited, inshallah, to be able to offer this. This is a 5-part lecture series. And so what we're hoping is that people who join the 5 lectures, either if you join it live like you are today, Or if you listen to the recording, so inshallah within 3 days, our aim is usually to get it up in 3 days, but it could be a little bit longer. But anyways, within the week, you should receive the recording of this particular lecture, and then you will also receive a reflection form. So the reflection form should be finished and submitted before our next IPRN lecture. And our second one is with Dr. Alia Sheikh, and that has been scheduled for June the 15th, so Saturday, June the 15th. So your reflection form based on today's lecture should be finished and submitted before that. And then that will be the methodology that we'll use in order to get 5 reflection forms done before each lecture. So they do have deadlines. They're a reflection form. So essentially you're trying to deepen your knowledge just in a few sentences to give feedback, just kind of ensuring that you did in fact listen to the lecture and are building your knowledge in this respect. And we're really happy to, something that we've been working on is developing, in the IPRN, is developing an actual course that will be, we're hoping, inshallah, around September. That will be a Maqasid Methodology course offered through the Maqasid Institute and IPRN, which is focused on Islamic psychology. So this is kind of the precursor to that particular course. So if you are able, inshallah, to follow all 5 of those lectures in the summer series, and you can finish the reflection forms within the deadlines, then we will be happy to offer that certificate. And we're also actually announcing, we didn't put it in the other, in the previous announcement because we wanted to kind of keep it here for the people who attended live today. We also, inshallah, will have from that big list, we will randomly draw 3 people who will get a free course to that upcoming course that I just mentioned. So inshallah, we look forward to people's participation. If you joined today and you didn't register, it's going to be really important that you do register, because the way that we will be communicating the reflection form that needs to be filled out will only be through that email. So I'll be sharing the link again if we recognize that maybe some people have come today right now without registering. So I'll provide that registration link. When you get that registration, if you've already registered, don't worry, you're fine. But if you joined today without registering, then please do make sure. And then you'll receive, as Sayyid Jamaluddin mentioned, the slides and the recording plus the reflection form. So just keep watching your email, essentially. Barakallahu fikum, inshallah. I'm looking forward to learning with all of you. Alhamdulillah wa shukrullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khairan, dear Sister Fatima, for an excellent presentation. And I highly encourage all of you to join the WhatsApp group for the IPRN. This is an info group where you guys can be updated on how you guys can contribute to the IPRN, how you guys can be part of it, both as researchers, but also as students or as project assistants or project managers. We need a lot of people for the IPRN, and we really believe this could be a very great platform for further developing the field of Islamic psychology, utilizing the Maqasid methodology that Professor Jasser Auda advocates for. So by all means, join the WhatsApp group. This link will be also shared in the Zoom chat. Also links to our Islamic psychology groups generally and other resources, our newsletter. Feel free to join it as well to be updated about what's happening in the movement. All these resources will be shared in the Zoom chat throughout the session. Professor Dr. Jasser Auda, just as a certificate of appreciation from us as ISIP and Al-Balkhi Institute for the amazing work you're doing. And we're recognizing that you're doing excellency also, and not only in Islamic psychology. You're, of course, go beyond any particular field in Islamic thought and all sciences. We appreciate the excellency, your contribution, your scholarly work as one of the leading scholars of our generation. We will email this to you as well. And this is signed from both Sister Fatima and myself, inshallah. Jazakallah.
Much appreciated. I haven't started yet, actually, but much appreciated. Much appreciated.
Jazakallah. This is from all of our colleagues in the ISIP and Al-Balkhi Institute. Our brothers and sisters. We have so many colleagues doing amazing work, Professor Jasser, from all of our local chapters, our leaders, project managers, active members. They're all very, very great colleagues doing khidmah, serving, and doing amazing work. And we all are excited to learn from you. So without any further ado, allow me to present you, Professor Jasser Auda, because we're all here to learn and to be with you. So Professor Dr. Jasser Auda, his latest contribution is a new Maqasid methodology that aims to bring about a restructuring of Islamic scholarship around a complex network of the higher objectives, Maqasid of the Quran and the prophetic tradition. He is Al-Shatibi Chair for Maqasid Studies at the International Peace University in South Africa, subhanAllah. He is a founding and board member of the International Union of Muslim Scholars. He's an executive member of the Fiqh Council of North America, a member of the European Council of Fatwa and Research, and the chairman of the Canadian Fiqh Council. He has a PhD in the philosophy of Islamic law from the University of Wales, UK, and a PhD in systems analysis from the University of Waterloo in Canada. Early in his life, he memorized the Quran and undertook traditional studies at the study circles of Al-Azhar Mosque in Cairo, Egypt. He has held professional positions at the University of Waterloo, Ryerson, and Carleton in Canada, Alexandria University in Egypt, Faculty of Islamic Studies in Qatar, American University of Sharjah in the UAE, and University of Brunei, Darussalam in Brunei. He continues to lecture on Islam and its law internationally and has written 25 books in Arabic and English, some of which have been translated to 25 languages. SubhanAllah. Professor Jasser, what an amazing, amazing, amazing background. We would like, before Professor Jasser, before you take over, to also invite all of you, as Sister Fatima mentioned, to the next lecture. This is actually our, I don't think it's June the 15th. I think it's wrong here. It's the last Saturday, which will be June the 29th. Please forgive us for this error. At 11 a.m. GMT. And we will share information to all of you who registered and also throughout all of our groups, network, social media, and newsletter as well. I also want to thank Sister Yusra, Sister Alia, Dr. Ahmed, Dr. Ildus, Dr. Zaid, and also I want to thank Sister Ariba, Sister Aifa, and Sister Dania, and Sister Nadira. And I hope I haven't forgotten anybody else, both in the IPRN and in the Maqasid Institute and in the ISIP, for all the work that you guys have done to be able to produce this IPRN and all of our other initiatives as well. So let me stop sharing my screen. Please forgive us for any shortcomings from our sides, by the way. And without any further ado, I will now give over the floor and the stage to you, Professor Jasser Auda. Thank you so much for joining us. Please go ahead. An honor to have you with us.
MashaAllah, the honor is mine, Allah. Sayyid Jamaluddin, barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala as'adi khalqi wa khatam rusuli Muhammad. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Wa radiyallahu an al-muhajirin wal-ansar. Wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawm ad-din. Thumma amma ba'd. Thank you very much for the introduction and certificates and stuff. Even before I start, thank you so much, and very kind and much, mashallah, adab from you both, Brother Sayyid Jamaluddin and Sister Fatima. Mashallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you in adab and ilm. And thank you for those who joined us here. I will try to be brief on the points I'd like to make, because I want to make a number of points today, and hopefully, inshallah, this will get a good discussion going. And I'm very happy to see this network of researchers when, like, I am a founding chair of the Maqasid Institute. And when I founded this institute almost a decade ago now, my dream was to see such networks operating. And I'm very happy to see that network starting to operate. It is fantastic that we have professionals from one discipline. I'll speak about disciplines versus multidisciplinarity, which is important. But at least we have one network from one discipline where people are all researchers and all are networking in order to make a difference. The purpose of creating a Maqasid methodology was actually to feed knowledge into this network and similar networks that we were dreaming to create at that time, so that perhaps we can have a shift in the status of knowledge of our ummah, status of research. Our ummah needs a lot of research at this time. Our ummah has a battle to fight. Our brothers and sisters in Palestine are fighting a battle to protect our honor and our sacred places and our existence as an ummah, for those who understand what's happening really. But this battle is not enough. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them victory, and it will come. But this battle in Palestine is not enough for our ummah to take the lead in this world and to fulfill its objective and its maqsid as a witness over humankind. We are a witness over humankind, not just in protecting ourselves and resisting injustice and occupation and so forth. We should also be witnesses over humankind through psychology and through archaeology and through architecture and through our politics and our economics, through our personal values and our hygiene. We should be the standard of family values and neighborly values. We should be the standard in everything that is good, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted this ummah to be. لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. And therefore, we have a duty to be witnesses over humankind. We cannot be witnesses over humankind in the psychology field and set the standards, as I am saying, if we come from a methodology that is not Islamic, a methodology that came out of people who have no religion or who have worshipped other gods with Allah, because this is directly related to the methodology they propose. There is no separation here from the aqidah of the scholar or the writer or the philosopher or the theorist and the knowledge that the theorist or the philosopher produced. There is no separation between the aqidah and the knowledge. And therefore, the person who has a total nihilist, atheist kind of background will produce knowledge that is impacted by that kind of mental state and heart state and knowledge. And therefore, it is essential that we come from an Islamic perspective as we approach psychology. Now, what is an Islamic perspective and how can we do it? I am not an expert in the field, and therefore I have a very, very heavy accent when I speak about psychology, because I really don't know the field. And hopefully you forgive me if I get some terminology wrong. I don't know, psychoanalysis versus, I will use that as a general person who reads, and therefore I could speak about psychology, but with a very heavy accent. But you don't have this accent. My accent comes from my legal background. I'm an expert in Islamic jurisprudence. And Islamic jurisprudence does not include psychology. Psychology is a different field. We are dealing with law, even when it comes to legislation, sure, in a state, that could be part of what we deal with. But we deal with law as well in terms of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and how they translate into fatwa and all of that. That's what we're trained in. And therefore, you are the ones who are going to do the right tafsir and the right interpretation of hadith and the right production of fiqh, so that you produce the fiqh of psychology that we need. I am not going to give you that background because I don't have the language that you speak. But what I can offer is a method, is an approach, is basically landmarks on the road towards having an Islamic psychology. And that these landmarks, I'm going to give some psychological reflections, but basically it is really up to you to take my advice on how to approach the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam in order for you to produce that knowledge. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the tawfiq for you. Let me see if I can share, and if you can see that, alhamdulillah. Now, I'm going to be speaking from a book that I published a few years back called Re-Envisioning Islamic Scholarship. Maqasid Methodology is a new approach. And in this book, and I can send a copy for our brothers and sisters in the network that they can share as they wish. The copyrights are mine anyway. Now, this book has to do with the re-envisioning of scholarship. And how is that? It comes with suggestions on how Islamic scholarship could be restructured. Do we need to restructure Islamic scholarship? Of course. With every new era, we need to do tajdeed of the deen, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that every 100 years, a group of people will do tajdeed, يجدد لها دينها. This tajdeed has to be done partly through the tajdeed of fiqh. And fiqh, as I mentioned, is not just the ibadat and the muamalat, ahwal shakhsiyya, zawaj, talaq. Fiqh is also psychology. And psychology is part of Islamic scholarship. We have a long history of that, but we would like to build on that history and stand on a firm ground of the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger in order to produce new knowledge of Islamic psychology. So I can send this book. It's rather long, a few hundred pages, but this is basically the complete, if you wish, statement of what I want to say today, not really what I want to say in those few minutes allowed to me. Let me start with what I wrote in chapter 6 of that book, which is the last chapter, in which I proposed that we really cannot renew Islamic scholarship without renewing the classification of knowledge, because we really cannot continue with the current Islamic classification of knowledge, in which if you want to study Islamic studies, then you go to an Islamic college or Islamic university and you study tafsir or hadith or da'wah or usul al-din, ilm al-kalam, you study Arabic language and so forth. But if you want to study psychology, you don't go to an Islamic university. You go to a good old secular university that is going to teach you psychology through one of the psychology philosophies. It will teach you through a Freudian worldview, through a Maslowian worldview. If you take courses in sociology or in social sciences, as part of your degree, you will see the world through a Hegelian worldview or a Durkheimian worldview, and so forth. And therefore, you come out with your psychology degree as a secular person who does not think that religion has anything to do with life. Yeah, perhaps people with their prayers, they might calm themselves a little bit, or people, if they, the very secular way of looking at Islam. But when we talk about having a different approach to knowledge, we're not necessarily talking about creating an Islamic psychology department, but rather we're talking about that as a step towards converting our knowledge into what we call here phenomena studies, into dealing with phenomena. Why? Because phenomena are not just confined to one silo of disciplines. There is no psychological illness that is just related to psychology, similar to the fact that there is no medical ailment that is just medicine, that it is how you eat and how you drink, it is how you live, it is everything about your life that is going to impact you and get you sick. And this is tied to everything in life. There is high connectivity between the phenomena that we live. And therefore, if you are going to define an ailment from a psychological perspective in a particular way, that ailment cannot just be coming from a psychology lens. because the psychology lens is an epistemological, if you wish, silo that is going to confine you to the ABCs and the foundations of the knowledge. We didn't even get there yet. So inshallah, we are now working on Islamic psychology. But I just wanted to say in the beginning that this is not the objective, but rather the objective is to deal with phenomena and to classify sicknesses and health states, psychologically speaking, and then perhaps we can break the silo of the discipline and go multidisciplinarity and then transdisciplinarity. Why? Because part of that discipline has to do with the usul, has to do with the Quran and the Sunnah. This area here, the intersection between disciplines and the usul, which are the Quran and the Sunnah and the studies around them. You really cannot do pure psychology without having some good knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You don't have to go all the way to authenticating hadith or not, or doing tafsir as in like the science of tafsir, but you have to know how to read the Quran for psychological purposes. And you have to have read the Quran cover to cover and studied it cover to cover for psychological purposes. And you have to know what is relevant from the narrations we have from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. If you combine all the narrations, their total will be about 3,000 hadith. So what is from the 3,000 hadith that we knew about the Prophet, that was narrated about the Prophet, that has to do with psychology? What do we know from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, which is mostly, as you know, around wars and so forth, but some of it has to do with the social aspects and the family aspects and so forth. So what is from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, including the seerah, and of course, including what is mentioned about him in the Quran, to start with, in addition to the Book of Allah, what from that can we draw from that to that discipline in order to benefit? And in order to think about a discipline of psychology, we have to strategize for it. We cannot deal with it within someone else's strategy. Because if you don't strategize for yourself, if you don't know where you're going, if you cannot represent what you are saying in comprehensible terms, not simple terms, we're not aiming to be popular or any of that here. We're aiming to create knowledge that is going to transfer and translate into systems of healing, into institutions, and these institutions are going to benefit society. Whether society likes it or not, whether society understands that or not, they come to you when you go to a doctor to get a surgery. You don't have to understand everything about the surgery. You are a simple person, or me in that case. Many of you are doctors already. I am a simple person in terms of medicine. I go to the doctor. I don't understand the depth of the medical knowledge that they acquire, but I trust them because they worked and they developed that knowledge. So we have to strategize, in other words, and not to care about the popularity of what we say, but rather to strategize for the sake of hitting the right buttons forward as an ummah in the field of psychology or the phenomena related to psychology. And here is the phenomena studies. We need to identify a number of phenomena, global and local, in particular communities, in which we want to deal with in a comprehensive way. One of your sisters who also took the Maqasid Methodology with us at the Maqasid Institute wrote something about suicide in a particular region in India, suicide of people of young age. That is, in my understanding, a psychological problem. But how can you deal with that in a comprehensive way? It is not just the psychological breakdown or failure that the young man or woman suffered from that made them, Allah forbid, take their own lives, but it is a number of political and economic and social and environmental and many, many other factors that impacted people and got them there. And before that, it has to do with Iman. Iman is not going to solve all your psychological problems, but it will give you the strength through which you can resist. You know, when you exercise and you become a fit person, you don't solve your medical problems, But at least if your body is strong enough, you can deal with diseases in a better way. Similarly, the way I see it is that if you exercise in terms of Iman, if your heart is strong and if your Iman is strong, you might not avoid a psychological ailment because we're humans, we break sometimes. Yaqub sallallahu alayhi wasallam got blind when he got so sad about Yusuf. And my understanding, that is a psychological problem that translated into a physical problem. But because of his Iman and his sabr, he was able to survive and he was able to have hope. And when the problem was solved, his sight went back to him and so forth. So the phenomena that we want to move your studies towards are very important so that you can free yourself from the silos and the dogmas and the myths of the discipline. Now, what is tafsir and what is ijtihad and what is ilm? We need to get out of the traditional definitions of these terms, my brothers and sisters. I want you to do ijtihad and to create fiqh. But fiqh in psychology, you're not going to give fatwa in issues of marriage and divorce and custody and so on, as we do as people who are experts in the family law. But you are going to give fatwa in psychology and on psychological issues. And yes, it is a fatwa because it has to do with haram and halal and mustahab and makruh. You say something is recommended to be done or something is haram to be done because you're going to break yourself, or going to kill yourself, or going to cause a lot of harm, or something is wajib to be done because this is going to free you from this and that is causing you to fall in haram. You see, so you're going to give fatwa in psychology and you're going to have ilm and ijtihad in the field of psychology. You're not going to give fatwa in the family law, similar to the fact that I cannot give fatwa in the field of psychology because I really have very, very general knowledge and I can't really allow myself to prescribe something to someone who has a psychological issue. And I cannot give a fatwa in an issue of urban planning and architecture. Does Islam have something to do with this? I was just with some brothers, we're talking about the planning of a city and so forth. We talked about Islam and what are the Islamic values for urban planning. How do you plan a city? It's not value-free, it's not philosophy-free, it's not faith-free. It has a lot to do with your faith and your philosophy and your understanding of the world. Similarly, they are not going to give you fatwa in psychology, and you are not going to give them fatwa in their urban planning, but they are the experts who are supposed to design that city from an Islamic perspective. What do you mean by Islamic perspective? For the city to have domes and ancient architecture and so on? Not necessarily. It could be modern architecture, but how you're going to do it, it takes an expert. It takes a methodology. It takes an approach. Similarly, in your case, so what do you want us to do with this Islamic psychology? You're not going to have an office to see patients? Yes, you will as well, but your approach is different. And what you are trying to do and your definition of the human being is going to be different from the Freudian definition or the Maslowian definition or any of these because they come from a different background. You might have an intersection with them. There is a lot of intersection with what any sound person would say. I don't know, not sure about Freud. I read his book and I was, weirded out with how strange of a human being he is. You're the experts, you could judge him better than I do. But perhaps with Maslow, some of what he said, especially towards the end of his life, the paper he wrote on the importance of religion in his Maslow hierarchy, is actually very interesting. It has a lot to do with Islam, but it's not Islamic. It's just hikmah that compares with what we know as Muslims. But we have to have our hierarchy of needs and our hierarchy of personalities and our types of thoughts and dreams. And we have a whole knowledge that is different from these people, even if we have some intersection. So basically, the objective is for you to have tasawwurat, to have perceptions and nazariyat and principles and formative guidelines for psychology from your reading of the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His message. What is the source of knowledge? Again, is the angel who came to Prophet ﷺ on this mountain on the other side in Ghar Hira, where he told him, Iqra, and he gave him that book. There is no chapter in the Quran that is called Surah Al-Ilm al-Nafs, you know, the Surah of Psychology, or Surah Al-Iqtisad, or Surah Al-Siyasa. But the Quran is full of siyasa, and it's full of ilm nafs, and it's full of history, and it's full of language, and it's full, depending on your reading. It is not a book of history, but the historian should read and learn how to do history. It is not a book of politics, but the politician or the political scientist should read the Quran and learn how to do politics. What are the concepts around politics? Al-Hukum, Al-Dawla. You read, and then you know what Allah is telling you from up above on politics, which is not exactly a blueprint of a particular state or a particular government, or how to divide departments or how to make policy, but it gives you guidelines. Similarly, in psychology, it's not going to tell you exactly what are the kinds of ailments and how to classify them and so forth, but it will give you guidelines on who the human is and what are the components of that human. We have a different human from these folks. We have a heart that we call qalb. We think here, actually, that we don't think here. Here is a brain. This is just a tool. It's just an organ in the Islamic perspective. The thinking is here, and the remembrance is here, and the faith is here, and the feeling is here. And yes, it might be connected with nerves and all of that. That's something to learn as well. But we believe that there is a qalb and there is a nafs. This is not just chemistry and genetics, and it's the chemical definition of the human. We have nafs that is not chemical inside the human, and we have ruh, and we have aql, and we have all of these concepts. These are very important so that you understand the human and therefore build your knowledge. Now, to restructure the science of psychology would be your objective. It doesn't mean that you throw everything you have learned in the garbage, of course not, but you critique and you restructure. What is good, you absorb and you redefine from an Islamic perspective. And what is not good according to Islam, you reject, you critique, you change, you replace with something else, and therefore our mission is to restructure that science. And again, not to be confined in the silo of the science, but to restructure it in order to free it from the biased disciplinarity and to make it multidisciplinarity, into studying different disciplines that are intersecting with your discipline so that you understand in a more comprehensive way and to connect it with the current phenomenon. What is the fundamental logic here after the fundamental source of knowledge, which is the Book of Allah and what is authentic from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? Fundamental knowledge needs a fundamental logic. The fundamental logic that is recommended for you in building this knowledge is the logic of connectivity. It is not the Greek logic of, you know, A implies B and B implies C, even though this is correct, but this is very narrow. What you need to do is to connect and to read the Book of Allah in a connected way and look at phenomena in a connected way. And therefore build your theories and form your worldview, your tasawwur and your nazariyat based on this connectivity, based on forming that kind of knowledge. As I mentioned, my talk about psychology will have a very heavy accent of just being a general reader rather than someone who is specialized or took courses at any level. I haven't. And therefore, my understanding is that you have psychoanalytic theories and you have humanistic theories, biological theories, and cognitive theories. And the psychoanalytic theories are based on a Freudian worldview. The humanistic theory is based on a Maslowian worldview, and the Darwinian worldview, and the cognitive people worldview. I did study cognitive science, so I have something to do with this. And as I mentioned, I did do some readings. when you read Freud, for example, and of course you know this better, his unconscious behavior is not an Islamic idea and needs high criticism from an Islamic perspective. His pleasure principle is not an Islamic idea. You find people who are in pain, but they're very happy in Islam. Why? Because they are sacrificing for the sake of Allah. They are doing something good. And you find people in pleasure in Islam who feel horrible because their pleasure is haram, for example. The adult behavior versus childhood experiences is also a worked kind of element of his worldview that is important to look at. The components of the personality and how all of this is made, to me, is contrary to what the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us. And therefore, you need to look at him and see who critiqued him, build on what their critique that they built, and try to come out of this tasawwur into an Islamic tasawwur that is much more guided. Oslo's tasawwur, or the worldview, comes through this hierarchy of needs that we know. But again, is this hierarchy Islamic? No. Some elements are similar to the Islamic elements, but they need to be restructured. We need to look at this in a critical way, keep what we know is good and fine, and to restructure what we could not accept from this theory. When you look at the Darwinian tasawwur and what I call the chemical definition of the human, so our human is just, you know, the nerves are carrying those electromagnetic signals that are making us move like robots. And we inherit things from our parents through our genetics. And that's it. And this is us, you know, something we inherit through genetics and motions and emotions, even that we go through because of our brain and the nerves and the neurons and that is not a right tasawwur of the human, because the human is much more than the flesh and the bones and the nerves and so forth. And what we inherit is much more than the DNA and the chemicals that we inherit from our parents. And therefore, we also need to look at this tasawwur worldview in a critical way. The worldview of the cognitive people, for example, when they develop the 4 stages of cognitive development, you know, as an outsider, and again, you're the experts, I see this as very European versus, you know, other cultures and other races that might think in different ways as they develop a child. And I see this as well as very confined to particular cognitive angle, a very narrow view of the humanity. Humanity is much wider than that, and therefore really cannot build the psychology of the human, who is very complex based on that. So what are we proposing in this Maqasid methodology? I'll send you the book, you can read more, and I'm glad that many of you are joining the course that the Maqasid Institute is going to offer in the fall, and it is very good, inshallah. Now, the methodology is those 5 steps. To start with a purpose. In order to research something, you have to have the right purpose, not a problem definition. Why? Because you might define the problem wrongly. You might misdefine the problem. Why? Because you haven't built a framework yet. You have not built the Islamic worldview yet that you look through which at psychology. And therefore, if you start your research by defining a problem that is defined through an un-Islamic or non-Islamic kind of theory, therefore you misdefine the problem. And when you misdefine the problem, you are going to misdefine the answer. The Islamic answer will be apologetic because you misdefine the problem, and therefore you're going to pick and choose something from Islam, and especially through Maqasid Sharia. Everybody is saying Maqasid Sharia now, حفظ الدين والنفس والعقل والمال والعرض. Just pick anything and just say the same good old psychology that you learned at school. From a secular, total atheist perspective, you can say the same thing, but it does have the nafs and it does hifz al-ird, and that, and nothing changes because you have not defined your purposes, your objectives from your research. Similar to the critique that we do again to Islamic finances, for example, because it is the same good old bank and the same good old riba. We define problems that are misplaced, and therefore we don't come up with genuine solutions. And we say that the banks are going to do hifdh al-din wal-nafs wal-aql wal-mal, and they continue, and the whole system is ribawi, and the whole system is problematic on many Islamic points, but they continue to do that. We don't want you to do like our brothers and sisters in the Islamic finances have been doing, because now the Islamic finances movement itself is trying to rectify itself. And the major figures that founded Islamic finances are now going back to say, no, we have been too superficial here. We have been too apologetic for the capitalist system. Read what Najatullah Siddiqui, for example, wrote, rahimahullah, before he died, our Ustad, Dr. Jamal Atiyah, what he wrote before he died, etc. So people in the Islamic finances are saying, we have been too apologetic, and we've been too, the Islamization as we did it was not deep, was superficial. And therefore, we should not do that, and we should go back and think about Islamic economics from the ABC. We want you to think about Islamic psychology from the ABC, have right purpose, and do not assume anything, and start from that. Now, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is a long story, but you do have to read the Quran. Do not refer to Tabari or Ibn Kathir or Zamakhshari or Sayyid Qutb or Muhammad Abdu. They are all great, but you are not studying for the sake of the Hakimiyya and the Jahiliyyah and so on, and therefore you don't need to read Sayyid Qutb as you study the Quran. You are not studying for the sake of the language, the high language of the Quran, trying to understand the structure of the sentences and some of the Aqidah issues. And so you do not need to read Zamakhshari. You are not studying in order to know what are Asbab al-Nuzul and the stories from the Sirah that are tied to the Surah that is Madani, Surah Makki, what was revealed and which battle and what happened in the battle. This is not your field, and therefore you don't need to read Ibn Kathir, for example, because that is what he does. And therefore, you need to have, if I may say, your own understanding of the Quran, your own tafsir. But maybe you're not going to write the whole thing as they did, but you will have to have your own reflections and your own understanding and explanation of some of the ayat that you find most relevant. All the ayat are relevant, by the way. Every ayat, in every meaning and every chapter, is relevant to what you are trying to do, but some of them are more relevant than others, and therefore you need to look at more relevant than others from your perspective. So therefore, you need to look at what ayat you're going to take. Refer to those who wrote about the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ related to the issues that you are going to research, and therefore, from this, try to come up with a framework, and we'll explain some of that for those who are not familiar with the Maqasid methodology. And from the framework, you go to the critical studies of literature and reality. This is the critique that we're asking you to do, but you do that after you build your Islamic background, after you read the Quran cover to cover and study it with psychological lenses that you wear. And therefore, you should come up eventually with the formative theories. They will emerge. They are not an algorithm that will create, something for you. Do not ask ChatGPT, because ChatGPT doesn't do this. Artificial intelligence could search in a library perhaps for a reference, could help you translate something you cannot translate in another language, but it cannot produce knowledge. It cannot produce real knowledge. Knowledge as in AI. And I'm speaking as someone who studied AI, actually. I have a PhD in AI. But basically, the AI doesn't produce knowledge. AI produces conclusions, produces data, amalgamated data, synergetic data, but not knowledge as in what we want you to produce. Not fiqh, really. The AI tool or bot will never have the fiqh that we're asking you to have. So please don't ask AI, what did the Quran say about this and that, and can I build this? Because it will go and search, do some data mining, and will give you some ideas. If you are someone who's not an expert and a very superficial person, you might find this brilliant, but it isn't, because it is generating knowledge that humans are supposed to generate. It is good in other things. It could aid you in the search through the libraries, as I mentioned, and in reading books in foreign languages. And in many, it could aid you in many things, but it really is not a tool that you should, I can't believe I'm saying this as well, you should depend on in reading the Quran for you and summarizing it for you. And therefore, this is the framework we want you to look at. And these are not different elements. They are the one and the same, but they are different dimensions of the Quranic truths. Al-Adl, for example, Al-Qist, the justice, equity in the Quran is an objective and is a concept and is a proof and is a value and is a command and is a group who are just and is a universal law. When you look at the human himself has sunan, sunan al-fitra, the fitra that Allah created, that's universal law. The human is a concept. The human, the health and the khair of the human, the integrity of the human, the soundness of the human are objectives. The values, etc. These are just dimensions you're looking at when you look at the human, and they are not really 7 separate elements. There is a whole chapter on that in that book that I will send you, inshallah, so you can read. That is when you build your framework. And that framework, inshallah, is going to allow you to critique literature and reality and shift from the Jahili, un-Islamic opinions and worldviews into an Islamic worldview. Again, not to reject everything in the world, but to absorb what is good and redefine it and put it in its right place in the Islamic paradigm, and reject what is evil or unfaithful or carries any negative connotation from the Islamic point of view, and destroy it or critique it or put it in the right place in the negative side of your knowledge. And therefore, you're going to be between 2 frameworks, the revelational framework and the human-made framework. And what you need to do is to come up with your own framework of your own concepts and objectives and values and so on that are going to allow you to define some formative theories and principles for your knowledge. The emergence of complexity is going to happen if you have enough effort. If you put enough effort, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you rizq, will provide you with the ideas that you are searching for. إنما العلم بالتعلم, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, knowledge comes by seeking knowledge. And every time you seek knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you knowledge. وَقُلْ رَبِّي زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. And therefore, this emergence of theories is going to happen based on your purposeful connectivity. You connect and you think about the purposes and the higher objectives and so on. And you follow this without falling into, again, imitation, partialism, apologism, contradiction, deconstruction. Talked about that in the book. Let's not take time with it. And let me just say at the end that this is a very, very brief introduction of a long story. I just wanted to give you the confidence, really, before anything, to read the Quran for yourself as a psychologist or as a practitioner or as a researcher, and look for knowledge there. There is a lot of knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in this book. And you are the scholar that we are asking you to produce that fiqh in that area, because you are qualified. You're most qualified than the Sharia scholars like myself, who are not qualified to do that. So if I am going to give fatwas in issues of economics and psychology and architecture and urban planning and history and language, just because I studied Sharia, then we are going to continue to be very poor in our genuine knowledge as an ummah. But if we make the Sharia people focus on the Sharia and its issues and so on, and allow other professionals who could read the Quran and benefit from it to develop their own fiqh, to develop their own movement, inshallah, we will have something good, and hopefully as an ummah, inshallah, we could stand on our feet and be witnesses over humankind in every good that is. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the best to this new project. I'm very happy to see. Alhamdulillah, Ba'ameen. Wa jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear Professor Dr. Jasser Auda. From the behalf of all of our participants and all of our members and all of our colleagues, we want to thank you for this very enlightening and great presentation, which is inspiring all of us who are either counselors, psychologists, students, or scholars within the field of psychology to dig deep into our tradition, to reconnect with the sacred tradition of ilm al-nafs and Islamic psychology. A round of applause, dear brothers and sisters, for our beloved teacher, Professor Dr. Jasser Auda. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much, Sheikhna. It's such an honor to listen to you. Every time I listen to you, it's like baklava to the heart. I really enjoy it.
Oh wow. Allah. This is هذا من أدبكم ولطفكم أخي. هذا من أدبكم.
Barakallah fikum, Sheikhna. You know, Sheikhna, in all honesty, I'm studying, I'm a counselor and I work clinically, trying to apply both my studies in Western psychology and Islamic psychology. And I'm also studying at the same time. And I'm currently doing a course in biological psychology. And I feel empty when I come home. And then I have my Zoom and my WhatsApp, and we have our ISIP and Al-Balkhi movement and connecting with scholars like yourself and others. It's really a baklava to the heart, because when you go to study Western psychology, it's so reductionistic, it's so minimalistic. The first lecture we had actually was essentially about the importance of monoism and disregarding dualism in psychology, disregarding the science of the soul, disregarding the etymological meaning of what psychology means, right? And it really kills you so much, both from a mental point of view, but also engaging in the studies. So it's always such a breath of fresh air to be able to learn from scholars like you. And I think I speak from behalf of all my colleagues and all of our members in ISIP that this is what we're longing for. When we got reconnected to psychology from Islamic paradigm, it was like giving more oxygen to our way of approaching health and well-being from an Islamic holistic paradigm. So I want to thank you, Professor Jasser. And I also want to thank all of you.
They take a credit. They take a credit for developing so much knowledge, and we do need to develop our knowledge. I mean, this is the knowledge we have out there. So, inshallah, you develop alternative.
Under your excellent leadership, inshallah. We follow your guidelines, inshallah, and guidance. I also want to thank Professor Rasul and Dr. Bagos, who are our chairs, and Professor Rasul is the chair, and Dr. Bagos is one of our chairs and leaders of the IPRN as well, for really putting their time to develop the Maqasid Methodology course that will be offered in the fall this year. And it's tailored for all of you who are psychologists or counselors or mental health professionals or students of psychology or academical psychologists, so that you can learn from the methodology that Professor Dr. Jasser Auda presented to us briefly today, and from his book, and what Professor Rasul and Dr. Bagos has done in such excellent way is to distill this and to tailor it for all of us who want to do research and take the research and apply it in clinical settings within the field of Islamic psychology. So all of our appreciation and love to Professor Rasul and Dr. Bagos as two of the most leading and profound scholars within the contemporary era. I also want to thank Professor Suleiman Dareen, Dr. Rabia Dasti, and also Dr. Ahmed Tahan, and the rest of our scholars in the IPRN for contributions, and also from the Maqasid Institute, beside Professor Jasser, of course, Dr. Illus and Dr. Zaid, and the rest of the excellent team, Dr. Alia, of course, and then Sister Yusra, Sister Ariba, Sister Mediha, Sister Dania, Sister Shireen, Brother Abdulaziz, Sheikh Yusuf, Sheikh Zaid, and all others who are inspiring us within the IPRN and the ISIP and Al-Balkhi Institute. Barakallahu fikum. And Sister Hafsa as well, I saw her. So there is a couple of questions here, Professor Jasser. And brothers and sisters, feel free to add your questions in the Zoom chat, address them to Sister Fatima Ahmed, and we will address them. If you write them to me, I won't be able to read all of them. So please write them to Sister Fatima Ahmed. I saw that Sister Atiqa wrote it to me. So please write it to Sister Fatima, inshallah. So let's see here. Shamuli Begum
also sent to Sister Fatima the book I thought about, and I asked her to post it for people who want to download it.
Inshallah. What we will do, Professor Yasser, is that if you send the book to me, we will share it in the IPRN WhatsApp group, the Islamic Psychology Research Network group. So please join that, and we will email it to all those who registered for the venue today as well, inshallah. And please join all of the lectures, and you will benefit even more from the book as well, inshallah. We have a very soft launch of the program that we're developing, and we will release. The Maqasid Institute will release as part of the IPRN in the fall. So please read that book before if you want to do the program as well. So Professor Yasser, Sister Shamuli here is asking, I don't know if this will be covered, but a great deal of the issue with psychology right now is that the role of the system and the systematic issues and societal and communal change overlook, placing the whole onus on the individual. Onus. I don't understand what that word is. Nevertheless, Islamic psychological services also are failing to trap by a lot of nafs work, but not the societal justice role of psychologists. So I don't know if there's any reflections with regard to that, Professor Yasser.
Absolutely, I believe in that. I totally believe in that, and I think putting the onus on the individual and burdening the individual in the individualistic culture that the West lives is one of the great problems of Western people and their psychology, and that's why many of them are fragile, psychologically speaking. Individualism and putting the onus on the individual rather than the family and the community and the society and all the circles of connectivity that we're talking about is one of the problems. I do agree. And I think this should be part of your healing process or diagnosis and prescription for people, that part of their health is by connecting to others. It's not individually. I can just go seek a counselor and find a problem or take a drug and I'm going to be fine. No, but you need to connect. Not just when the husband and wife come to you and you start to connect them. It's not just that, but you want to make sure that the individual is connected. And that is part of the Islamic worldview. The connectivity that we have is part of our health.
MashaAllah, barakallahu fikum. So that's great advice, Professor Yasser, it's our duty and responsibility to further bring about this awareness. And Dr. Hanan, thank you. She is saying your knowledge is also like coffee for the soul, mashallah. Dr. Hanan is also one of the great scholars within the field. We're very honored to have you with us, Dr. Hanan. So let's see here. There is another question from Anas. Anas is asking, Professor Yasser, in order to reconstruct knowledge in the Islamic sense, is it necessary to rename all the words and concepts in a specific discipline, such as medicine, that has a lot of Greek or Latin influences, and infuse them with Quranic concepts and words?
No, not necessarily. Well, Greek and Latin, anyway, are daughters of the Arabic language. If you read in the history of linguistic studies from the Islamic point of view. But this is not the point. The point is to rename something that cannot be possibly not renamed. You rename the sensitive issues. Like, for example, consciousness, which is translated in Arabic as al-wa'i, is actually is a concept that would need revision. You cannot just say consciousness, because what do you mean by that? From the Islamic point of view, we call it life, al-haya, and everything that is hayy, and everything is hayy anyway. Even the rock is alive and sinks from the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very different worldview. Do you have to rename? Perhaps you do, because al-wa'i is different from al-haya. Consciousness is different from life. And everything that is alive, by definition, is conscious, as they say in cognitive sciences or neurosciences. The definition of consciousness is a very chemical definition. So my point is to rename something that is going to be harmful, not to rename, or is going to cause misconception. But yeah, to rename the names of, I don't know, the elements, the medicines, and of course not. Like, we don't have to do that because it's not hard. Allah alam.
Jazakallah khairan, Professor Yasser. There is actually quite a lot of reflections from our current participants, and also actually I think it will be great to reflect upon. Professor Jasser, what is the difference between utilizing, a couple of people asking the same question, utilizing the Maqasid methodology that you advocate for when it comes to, for instance, in our case, doing more research within psychology, and let's say Islamization of psychology or any other field? What is the key differences here?
Well, Islamization of knowledge is not one thing. It started with the paper that Professor Farouqi has published back in the 70s and early 80s, rahimahullah, in which he suggested that the researcher should have علم ديني وعلم الدنيوي عقلي ونقلي شرعي وحياتي, and therefore they suggested that you study Sharia and you study a discipline. So how do you study Sharia? By going back to the books of fiqh of the past and develop yourself as a scholar of Sharia. And how do you study a Hayati discipline? Through a secular textbook, a secular worldview. You go to a university that offers a degree in psychology, and therefore you have a degree in psychology and a degree in hadith, for example. And this is obviously very different from the integrated approach that we want to take. We want you to be a psychologist, but we want you to be the one who is reading the Quran and the Sunnah, not for the fiqh as in tashriya, as in Ahmad bin Hanbal and Shafi'i wa Malik wa Ja'far, not like that. To read so that you develop your own understanding. Islamization of knowledge developed afterwards and called for integration of knowledge. And perhaps that is closer to what we talk about, but still the integration of aqli and naqli still had issues of al-aqli is quite influenced by al-Almani or the secular. Read Dr. Naqib al-Attas's critique, for example, of Islamization in that sense, and the naqli having a lot to do with the tafsir of the past and so on, and therefore confined to a worldview of a mufassir that lived in a different century and sees the Quran in a different way. And therefore, even the integration of knowledge, and also the integration of knowledge went through two phases. One of them is saying that you integrate only in the social sciences, but not in the natural and applied sciences. And therefore, is psychology a social science or an applied science? Some people say it isn't. And if you look eventually to what Professor Malik al-Badri, rahimahullah, has developed from the Islamization school, you will start to see something very similar to what I'm proposing here. In fact, I learned from him for the methodology. Why? Because he reached a stage that is not aqli and naqli or dini and dunyawi and scholars of the text and the context. And not that. He reached a stage of integration of his knowledge, and he produced some very good critique on psychology in the modern sense and way forward. Rahimahullah, he just opened the doors, and you, inshallah, students of psychology, should continue the road.
Inshallah, we all consider ourselves to be students of Professor Malik Badri, who would not be able to facilitate this movement without his pioneering work, and of course yours and all of our scholars in the Islamization knowledge movement. Because as you say, it started and then it developed, and people developed their ideas as many pioneers do. So from Islamization to integration.
If I may add as well.
Sorry?
The central position of the Quran and
yes.
the central position of the Quran and the asking of the students of knowledge to centralize the Quran and read it for themselves. That is different from both the Islamization and the Qutiyya schools. I'm a student of both, but I am just saying that what we're proposing is different from these two schools because they did not go out of, let's say, the modernity framework, and they did not allow students of knowledge to read the Quran for themselves and develop their own fiqh through that.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Jazakallah khairan for clarifying, Professor Jasser. Professor Jasser, when it comes to ijtihad, I think if you could reflect with us and share you spoke about it a little bit. I think sometimes people are very afraid of using the word A lot of people feel like they're not qualified enough to do ijtihad for rightful reasons, right? It's out of respect for our sacred tradition. So could you share, like, from your point of view, you mentioned a little bit in your lecture, of course, which was great, why, if people study the Maqasid methodology and ground themselves in Quran and Sunnah, of course, which is the prerequisites, why a person could do ijtihad when it comes to psychology, for instance. Could you further clarify that for
Of
people?
course, ijtihad and istinbat and so forth, and fiqh and fikr, this is not closed. I mean, I don't know how you learned about Islam. Perhaps you learned about Islam through people who believe in the closure of the door of ijtihad. Some people do that, and that's a very wrong idea. The door of ijtihad is never closed, and the ummah should always think, should always develop its own fiqh. But it's about specialization. It's about knowledge, not specialization in disciplinary sense, but it's about knowledge. You develop knowledge in something, therefore you are the one who's going to do ijtihad in it. And this is ijtihad. And someone like me who studied, again, the sciences of Sharia cannot do ijtihad in your issues of psychology. You could see from my talk how much I don't know about psychology. Yes, perhaps it's obvious, because this is not something I studied well. And therefore, I am just giving you methodology ideas. I'm giving you a framework. But you do ijtihad, and don't be afraid of doing ijtihad. Why? Why not? When you study a science for 5 or 10 years and you develop your knowledge of the Quran in a good way, and you have your background in psychology from whatever school it is, then you start to have ijtihad, and then you start to have fiqh and understanding. This is not monopolized, or should not be monopolized, by fiqh in the tashri'ah sense, because you're not going to give fatwa again in zawaj and talaq and zakah and riba, and because you don't understand in that. But you will give fatwa in psychological issue. Similarly, the scholar who studied mu'amalat maliyah, for example, they can give fatwa about al-murabaha, wal-riba, wal-bay' wal-mudaraba, but they cannot give fatwa in your field because they don't understand. They don't understand the field. إنما العلم بالتعلم. Knowledge is, knowledge creates scholars. This is what the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. It's just media stuff and politics. Don't be afraid.
Alhamdulillah. So the message from our teacher, Professor Jasser, dear colleagues, dear brothers and sisters, is to not be afraid, inshallah. Inshallah. Thank you so much. Shamu, let's see here. Madi has writing following question, Professor. I'm very pleased to hear Professor Jasser mention the multifaceted approach necessary for the healing of mankind. Professor Jasser also mentioned how we need to know the Quran and the corpus of Hadith fully to respond to the psychological needs of mankind and how to help them to heal. In my personal experience, sitting with scholars, knowing the Quran and the Hadith doesn't automatically give you the ability to advise psychologically. Furthermore, such studies take a good decade of studies to begin to understand the Quran and the Hadith. There are a practical implication to this. As a therapist and coach on the ground working with these clients, what is advised for me?
What is advised is to give yourself time, depending on your goal. If your goal is to produce genuine knowledge and to produce basic research and to really add to human knowledge, a decade is not too long in order to familiarize yourself with the Quran and with the relevant parts that were narrated about the Sunnah, so that you can develop a framework. That is normal. Even those who study fiqh, that you sit and learn from them, they did not develop genuine knowledge in a couple of years. I mean, they can go and get a diploma and claim to be muftis and stuff, but that's silly. That is not the fiqh. Fiqh cannot be learned in less than a decade or 2 or 3, actually, so that you can sit down and do fiqh, as in tashri'ah, I mean. Fiqh of psychology is no different. Why is the journey to knowledge that long? It is not different journey to knowledge. No historian in any big university is going to write a new book on history, a really new take, without being a full professor. A full professor has to be in his 50s or something. You see, not a guy who got his PhD yesterday in history, and therefore now he's going to change the narrative of history. Of course not. It takes time to get knowledge. But if you want like quick results and you want tomorrow to subscribe something different, then yeah, you could start to, read some of the knowledge that is already developed. But this is not how you create knowledge. Creating knowledge takes time. It's not.
MashaAllah, mashallah. Great advice, great nasiha, Shaykhna. Thank you so much. And I do agree. I think we live in a time and era, Professor, where it's all about fast communication and quick answers and quick rebuttals, and there is not a lot of time for reflections and tadabbur and tafakkur and introspections. And I think this advice is very important. And it's also, we live in a very super, both Darwinistic society in the sense that it's survival of the fittest. You need to like do the better TikTok than the other one, and then you need to have the best LinkedIn page to market your name or your efforts. And it's all about, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against people being on these platforms, not at all. You can utilize TikTok to something good and LinkedIn as well. I just gave it as an example. It's all about Twitter, 160 sentences, and then you need to solve the whole mystery of conflicts in the world. So your advice is really to let us marinate, let us process, rather than seeing it as a project, see it as a process, and that knowledge is something that we inquire throughout our whole life. What would you say, Professor Jasser, with regards to lived experience as well? Is that also fundamental as a way to work with scholarly work, utilizing the Maqasid methodology? I mean, of course, grounding yourself in Quran and Sunnah and the primary sources of Islam, understanding your field in itself. What do you say with regards to lived experience and having experience of living and emphasizing with the people that you want to support with your research, for instance?
Lived experience is essential, is very important, but you have to wear an Islamic lens as you look to reality, because you live in the world and you describe what is around you in a particular way. Just be careful how you describe what is around you. So lived experience is essential, but you have to describe your reality in an Islamic way. Describe reality in a non-Islamic way. And then you say, based on my lived experience, I'm going to do this or that. So work on your framework, work on your worldview, work on التصورات. الحكم على الشيء, we say in fiqh, الحكم على الشيء فرع عن تصوره. You cannot judge something until you perceptualize it, until you understand it. And that tasawwur is very important for you to create, inshallah.
Barakallah fikum, Shaykhna. Thank you for great advice. With your permission, can I just take we'll have one more question, inshallah, and then we're mindful of your time. Is it okay, Professor? Because I know it's
yeah, of course.
Okay. Professor, by the way, to all of our Malaysian brothers and sisters, all of our members from Malaysia, Professor Jasser is in Malaysia right now, in the beautiful country of Malaysia. Yeah, mashallah. I went to Malaysia last year. I want to come back to Malaysia. I'm planning to have a base in Malaysia. I'm building that now. So
inshallah.
Together
Today
in
I'm in a
Malaysia.
city called Malacca,
Oh yeah, it's
somewhere
beautiful.
between Malaysia, between Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. So very
In
beautiful.
Malacca, what is it called? The city, Malacca?
Malacca. Yeah, Malacca.
Do you have any programs that people can join if they're in Malaysia now?
No, I'm done with the program. It was it was a seminar this morning. It was a different story.
Okay, inshallah,
it's a seminar this morning here. Yeah.
Inshallah, we will invite you all over the world. Inshallah, we have a lot of your students here from all over the world. We're all over.
Allah inshallah.
So the last question. So Professor Dareen, I think your question was answered, Hojam. It was about Islamization of knowledge and Professor Auda's Maqasid Methodology, Hojam. Jazakallah khair, Hojam, for being here.
Barakallah fiik. أهلا وسهلا.
أهلا بك سيدي، أهلا بك، شكرا لهذه المؤتمر المفيدة جدا. شكرا.
مرحبا. تشكر ديرين.
Thank you.
Hojam is one of the great scholars in Islamic psychology, by the way. He's very humble, our Hojam. Let's see here. Sister Masuma, Professor Jasser, is asking, Salam, I wanted to ask a question to the professor. Is it possible that psychoanalysis was not only from Freud's worldview, the humanistic psychology was not only from Maslow's worldview, but that it may also have been the reflection of the societal needs of their time? maybe we can take into account the sociological context of each theories and worldviews. We know how psychopathology is impacted by social and environmental contexts.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. أهل مكة أدرى بشعابها. The people of Mecca know the roads of Mecca better. So I am not going to argue with you about Freud or Maslow. You know them better. And yes, I do agree that the theories do not develop in vacuum. They develop through a worldview, through a background. And each of your backgrounds, inshallah, will contribute, inshallah, something good. Barakallahu feekum.
Alhamdulillah, you're right, Professor Yasser, and I appreciate your question. I mean, if you look at Freud, I'm sure if he was raised in a Muslim country, he will never become a psychoanalytic person, for sure, because his reaction to pathology was a reaction from the very non-fitri Victorian view of living according to, you know, the emotions that Allah has given you. You know, the Victorians were very repressive, and it was not natural in the way that Islam teaches us, that they didn't, their notions were very like, and that's where he became very much atheistic, because he thought that religion was the Judeo-Christian notions that he was facing, actually, even though he had some Islamophobic tendency as well towards the Bosniaks in particular in his readings. So hope if he was born in Egypt, maybe he will not become the father of psychoanalysis.
No, he might have become worse.
Maybe.
Because the hidayah is from Allah. I have seen people in Egypt who are worse than that. The hidayah is from Allah. The hidayah,
that's true.
whether you're born in America, Muslim country or non-Muslim, I don't know these things anymore. The hidayah is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if Allah guides you wherever you are born and whatever society around you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide you through. Even if the closest people to you are, you know, zindiq and kuffar, and you could be a very good person, and you could be in an excellent environment, and you decide to deviate, whether you are anywhere. Inshallah.
That's a great reminder, Professor. Thank you so much for those excellent reminders. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to never deviate and to follow the straight path and to learn and to grow, inshallah, in a community of sohbah and also community of ilm, inshallah. From behalf of the whole ISIP and the Al-Balkhi Institute, we want to thank you for giving out of your precious time. We're very honored to have you as one of our scholars and teachers, Professor. Thank you for supporting us and establishing this IPRN under your excellent leadership. We really recommend all of you brothers and sisters from all over the world, all of our colleagues in ISIP, but also other, to join the IPRN and benefit from utilizing the Maqasid methodology that Professor Jasser Auda is advocating to do more research in Islamic psychology. We need research in neuropsychology from Islamic point of view, social psychology from Islamic point of view, industrial and organizational psychology from, you know, and many other applications, right? And Professor Yasser's book is a great start, and please do the program the Maqasid Institute will offer through the IPRN under the leadership of Professor Rasul and Dr. Bagus in fall, inshallah, where the whole program is filtered and attuned according to those who are interested in psychology. And also check, we will share the recordings of Dr. Bagus speaking about how he utilizes Maqasid methodology in his research, and also Professor Rasul as well, inshallah. Any last words from you, Professor Yasser, before we let you go, because it's very in Malaysia.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khairan and all the best. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you ilm and fiqh and allow you, inshallah, to contribute to knowledge and contribute to people's health. What you are doing is very important for humanity. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide you to the best. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide our ummah and protect our ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give victory to the oppressed, give victory to those who do jihad in His way, to defend our existence as an ummah and our honor as an ummah and our deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala liberate our Muslim lands, especially from the oppressors. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide all of us to the best ways and choose for us the best choices, and end us with the best ends in this world, and give us the best receival in the afterlife. Ya Rabbi, Jazakumullah khairan, barakallahu feekum.
For this beautiful dua. I mean, thank you, Professor Yasser, for allowing us to work with your Maqasid Institute. We consider Maqasid Institute to be one of the leading institutes from Islamic thought. Thank you so much, Professor. We love you for the sake of Allah, Professor.
In the institute.